Okay. Well, it's 5 o'clock now. Let me try one more time.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not letting us post to our, because ours is a business page, so I wonder if that has something to do with it. Okay. Okay, well, we'll just make the link available later. I'll post it to our YouTube, and then I'll post that link to our Facebook. But yeah, get started. Okay, so you can see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Is it full screen?
I can see like the presenter view.
Okay. Just disconnect them. Okay. Oh, what's happening to my screen? Technical difficulties. Cool. Okay, so that should be full screen, correct?
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome. Brilliant. So to everyone that's already logged on, because we do have a people logged on, we have a few people. Thank you for putting up with our technical difficulties. I'll imagine Zoom is a platform that it takes some adjusting to. So we were hoping to get this live on Facebook. However, it seems like our accounts they're not fully connecting and we can't post to our page. So what we'll do is we are recording on our business account now. So after this presentation, I'll make the entire presentation available on YouTube, and I'll post the link to our Facebook page so that way it can easily be shared. So yeah, like I mentioned, thank you all for sharing your time with us. My name is Wendy Roman. I am the Development and Communications Lead here at Immigration Counseling Service. And I will give Anna Sophia a moment to introduce herself as well.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Anna Sophia and I am a paralegal with Immigration Counseling Service.
Thank you so much for being here, Anna Sophia. Today we're going to be talking about different avenues to legal status, about how to interact with ICE, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll share ways that people can get connected with trustworthy immigration representation here in the state of Oregon. So just as a brief disclaimer before we begin the actual presentation, all of the information contained within these slides is very general. It is not legal advice and it should not be considered legal advice because when it comes to immigration, every single case is very complex, it's very intricate. So that is why we always advise folks to first sit down with an accredited or licensed attorney who can break down their case, who can learn their story, who can take all of their experiences into account for them to advise you on how to proceed with the type of status that you may want to acquire. So very much this information is general. We hope that it'll be hopeful in guiding your next steps. However, after this presentation, definitely consult with an attorney if you are interested in proceeding with any of the following pathways. So a little bit about Immigration Counseling Service. We are a nonprofit that's been operating in the state of Oregon and Southern Washington for over 40 years. We are an independent nonprofit, so that means that we're not connected or affiliated with like a religious organization or private donors or anything like that. Our intent and our mission is to deliver low cost but high quality legal services to folks at different stages of their immigration process, especially right now in the context of the pandemic. We understand that a lot of folks have been negatively and severely impacted. Either they lost their job, they were themselves contracted COVID-19. So we want to make sure that our services continue to become available, that they are affordable, and even when folks aren't able to fully pay for these services, we will try our best to find funding so people can continue their immigration cases.
Hi everyone, so I just wanted to run through quickly the different types of cases that we accept. So we work with residency cases for clients who are applying for their green cards. We also help out with citizenship for clients who want to naturalize. We work with family petitions, which these are common cases you may have heard of, in which family members can petition for their parents, their son or daughter, or a close relative. We also work with humanitarian visas and asylum. humanitarian visas are for certain qualifying crimes which were committed in the United States. And then we also work with DACA. During the Trump administration, we worked a lot with renewals. And now that the Biden administration has allowed initial DACA applicants to apply, we are working a lot with those as well. So all of these will be discussed in the upcoming slides, more in depth.
So just a little bit of background information. Our state here in Oregon is very diverse. There are a large amount of people that can be considered immigrants or foreign born. Just in the state of Oregon, we have approximately 432,000 folks in Oregon that weren't born in this country. 45% of those folks are naturalized citizens. 29% have some type of legal status, whether that's DACA, whether that's one of the visas, residency, and then a significant amount, 26%, or about 113,000 people in the state of Oregon alone are considered undocumented. So that means that a large number of Oregon families currently have at least one or more family members who are undocumented. And before we keep going, we do want to assure people watching that we'll have a time at the end to ask questions. Please utilize the Q&A function to drop any questions. Periodically throughout the presentation, we'll stop to check the chat, and then toward the end, we'll open up the floor.
So, avenues to legal status and affirmative legal action. What is affirmative legal action? Affirmative legal services help individuals navigate the process of applying for immigrant status for themselves or their family members and applying for visas for crime, trafficking, and domestic violence victims before individuals are put into immigration proceedings. These services help people stay out of immigration court and prevent the trauma and tremendous expenses of deportation proceedings.
Yeah, and to begin on the different avenues, so here on the slide we have the different avenues to legal status that are considered affirmative legal action, and we'll be going in depth into these in these following slides. So to begin with, we can cover family petitions. So ICS does do a lot of family petitions for clients, and this is the type of avenue that a lot of folks hear about, possibly like in the news through their family. This is the situation where a parent or a child over the age of 21 essentially applies for benefits for their immediate family. So this pathway can lead to a green card if everything goes according to plan and all of the eligibility requirements are followed. Essentially, U.S. citizens can petition for parents, for their spouses, or for their own children. So once you apply for a family petition, if your family petition is approved, you still have to wait in line for a visa to become available. And these wait times, they vary in length because they are dependent on the type of relationship. So sometimes the wait time for, say, an immediate relative. So if I were to petition for my parents, that would be a lot shorter than, say, if my parents were to petition for a brother or sister of theirs. So really these wait times can be as short as 1 year. They can be as long as 15 years or more. This is an unfortunate aspect of the immigration process. We are hoping that under the Biden administration, the caps on some of these family visas will be expanded so people don't have to wait as long. But essentially, if you apply through the family avenue and your petition is approved and then you get the person applying receives their residency, then from residency, you may have the ability to apply for citizenship. So if you received your green card through marriage, that wait time is only 3 years. If you received your green card through another immediate family member that's not a spouse, then your wait time would be about 5 years before you're eligible to apply for citizenship.
So diving now into humanitarian relief. These are visas for victims of a crime, and these crimes range in type and severity. So we'll dive into a little bit more of the different types of crimes, but basically who is eligible to qualify. Those would be survivors of domestic violence, could be children who have been abused or abandoned, victims of certain crimes if they are reported to police, survivors of prosecution in the home country, and trafficking survivors. So there's three main types of humanitarian options that we can help out with. The first one is called a U visa, and the U visa are for victims of serious crimes. Potential applicants will need to provide evidence that the battery or abuse violated US law. The public policy behind the U visa is that these immigrant victims could aid police officers and prosecutors by providing information that is helpful in investigating these crimes and bringing the criminals involved to justice. One drawback of the U visa, though, is that the law limits the number given out to about 10,000 per year. So you could wait years for your U visa to be approved. While waiting for the U visa to be approved, the government can place you in what's called deferred action, and that can allow folks to get a work permit and social security card. So while you're in the wait list, you do receive those benefits. And then at least 3 years after your visa has been approved, you can apply to adjust your status to permanent residency and apply for a green card. So it is a path to residency. Now, the second visa is called a T visa, and that is for victims of severe human trafficking. So someone who was transported, harbored, transferred to the US under threat, coercion, deception, abuse of power in order to engage in prostitution, pornography, involuntary servitude, forced labor, etc. There's a long list of the crimes that are involved. And in order to qualify for a T visa, you must be present in the US as a result of human trafficking. There are a multitude of other requirements to applying for a T visa. Applicants for T visas must not refuse a reasonable request to cooperate with law enforcement officials who are investigating and prosecuting the human trafficking crime. T visa applicants will need to show that the removal from the US would cause extreme hardship involving unusual and extreme harm. Okay, and now the third form of relief is called VAWA, which pertains to certain sections of the Violence Against Women Act. That's where the acronym VAWA comes from. Provide immigration benefits to eligible spouses, parents, and children who have been victims of abusive US citizen or lawful permanent residents. Under VAWA, certain foreign nationals no longer have to rely on their family member abuser to help them obtain lawful status in the US, and they may self-petition for a green card. The immigration component of the Violence Against Women Act allows that victims of abuse by a US citizen or legal permanent resident spouse, a citizen or legal permanent resident parent, or a citizen or legal permanent resident child to complete their immigration process independent of their abusive family member. So another avenue for relief is called DACA, which is one that our audience members might have familiarity with. So DACA is a policy fought for by immigrant youth and created by the Obama administration in 2012 to protect certain undocumented individuals who came to the United States as children from deportation. In addition to protection from deportation, DACA recipients are eligible for work authorization, a social security number, and a state-issued identification or driver's license. DACA does not grant lawful status, such as a visa or green card, nor does it offer a pathway to US citizenship. DACA is only temporary protection, and while completing a DACA application, many attorneys will still try to screen for additional paths to lawful status. Until very recently, USCIS, which is US Citizenship and Immigration Services, was only accepting renewal applications. Folks that had obtained their DACAs before this 2017 move to rescind the program were still able to renew this benefit. Now, however, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, DACA is open to enrollment once more. DACA allows recipients to work, study, and have access to healthcare and other benefits. Some DACistas may qualify for permission to travel outside the country for special reasons, including education, job, travel and for humanitarian reasons, such as visiting alien relatives. This is known as advanced parole. So DACA eligibility, what are the requirements? DACA provides 2-year renewable permission to work, including, as I mentioned before, an EAD, which is the employment authorization document known as your work permit, your state ID, and the social security card. So the main requirements for someone to apply for DACA for the first time is that they were born after June 15th, 1981, that they came to the US before their 16th birthday, that they've resided in the US since June 15th, 2007, that they were physically present on June 15th, 2012, that they did not have status on June 15th, 2012, and that they are currently in school, graduated from high school, completed a GED, or were honorably military discharged, and as well as not having been convicted of certain crimes. So there's a lot of documentation that goes into proving this, especially the continuous residence in the United States since June 15th, 2007. So if anyone is interested in applying for DACA for the first time, we are helping clients out with that. Our office is accepting applications, and we'll help you to gather all of that documentation because it can be a lot. Usually clients will use school records since kindergarten through high school, or medical records, or if you have a job, you can use your pay stubs or your taxes, anything that has your name and the date on it, and if it has your address too, that's helpful. So those are just some of the documentation that is required to apply for DACA for the first time.
Yeah, and these two slides were a pretty general overview of the requirements for DACA eligibility. On May 19th, ICS will be hosting a panel with 2 immigration attorneys, Selby Abraham and Isaac Alley, and they'll be going very in-depth into the DACA process, into advanced parole, and there will be about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the presentation for really specific questions about DACA. And if you go on our Facebook page, ICS.pdx, you'll be able to find more information in the coming days. And now to talk a little bit about citizenship and applying for citizenship. Essentially, US citizenship is the gold standard in the immigration process because once you are naturalized or once you are a citizen, you have access to a multitude of rights and a multitude of benefits. Once you are naturalized, once you become a US citizen, you have the right to vote in state and federal elections. You can petition for other family members. You can go live abroad without having to do all of this extra documentation because a lot of folks don't realize that when someone is in the immigration process, when they are, trying to get a benefit, their travel options are very, very limited and sometimes non-existent. Like we mentioned during the conversation about DACA, just to go see, a relative that is hurting, that might be dying, you have to fill out paperwork and apply for permission just to leave the country. However, once you become a citizen with a US passport, that travel time becomes a little simpler. So to apply for citizenship, you have to meet a lot of pretty intense requirements. The biggest one, is to have been a legal resident, to have your green card. So like we mentioned before, you have your green card for 3 years if you received that green card through marriage, or you have your green card for 5 years if it was through one of the other avenues. So once you have met that time, you can start looking into applying for citizenship. Even though the citizenship application on paper looks pretty straightforward, you can go on the USCIS website and download the actual application. We strongly recommend that people sit down with attorneys before beginning the citizenship application. So an attorney can look at any of the little loopholes that exist because citizenship does have some pretty intense clauses relating to crimes. So there are certain criminal issues or travel even. If you are a resident and left the country for more than 6 months, this may negatively it may affect your citizenship case. So that's why before applying, it's important to sit down with an attorney so they can take a look at your travel time, so they can do a background check and look at any documents related to criminal issues to make sure that you are eligible, that you can apply. Because if you apply and you don't meet some of those requirements, that can have some pretty negative consequences. So at the end of the presentation, we'll share resources of trustworthy attorneys that you can contact to talk about your citizenship case or to talk about a DACA case or any of the humanitarian visas. And before we continue, I'm going to check the chat because it does look like we have a couple of questions. So first question, are there requirements for family petitions other than yourself being a US citizen? Do you want to take this one, Anna Sophia? So that would be like I-130s.
Yeah, so I was going to also mention that there's different categories of family petitions. It doesn't only have to be a US citizen, so a legal permanent resident could petition as well. So there's kind of 4 main categories. There's one that's called F1, which would be for unmarried sons and daughters of US citizens. There's also spouses and children and unmarried sons and daughters of permanent residents. There's F2A, which is spouses and children of permanent residents. There's F2B, which is unmarried sons and daughters that are 21 years of age or older of permanent residents. There's F3, which is married sons and daughters of US citizens. And then there's also F4, which is for brothers and sisters of adult US citizens. So depending on the category, there's different preference categories and a different amount of visas that are available each year. And some categories for what's known as immediate relative, which is if you are spouse, parent, or son or daughter under 21 of a US citizen, those immediate relative categories, those are faster. But the others that I had mentioned before are also categories that you could petition for, and they may potentially take longer for a visa to be available.
Yeah, and when it comes to family petitions, like the initial portion, like the I-130 to, make that connection in the eyes of immigration to say like, I am related to this person, that one doesn't have as many kind of like huge eligibility criteria. It's later on when you're actually applying or, trying to get that green card where the eligibility does get a little more intense, because someone may be eligible, claim some type of relationship to a US citizen. However, if they entered into the country like without documentation, that complicates the case. So that's why we continue to advise people to always just sit down for essentially like an eligibility screening with an attorney, because most immigration firms, the way that they operate is once you walk through the door, the first thing they do is they screen you for multiple types of benefits. If you don't qualify for DACA, then you may qualify for a family petition, or you may have a way to qualify for a U visa. And during those screenings, they're able to really answer these bigger questions and look into like these complications that may be down the road as you embark on your immigration process. And to keep going, there's a second question. For VAWA, would you have to be legally married to your partner, or how is spouse defined? So that's a pretty specific one that I think would have to be tackled with an attorney, because there are very different definitions to like what is marriage. But VAWA very much serves as a way to, I don't want to say like interfere, but correct me if I'm wrong, Anna Sophia. VAWA is like, let's say the process for immigration has already, let's say like I'm an immigrant and my husband, is petitioning for me, and then halfway through the case, something occurs where I am no longer safe in his presence. That's where VAWA steps in to like sever that petitioner beneficiary tie. So now I can continue my process individually of this person who may have been putting me in danger.
Yeah, so for VAWA, I believe that you do have to be legally married, but there's also conditions where if you are divorced and within a certain amount of time, you can also apply. So I would definitely, if you are think that might be a possibility for you to consult with an immigration attorney so you can see the full possibilities for your case.
And
Because
like
there might be other options for you as well.
Mhm. And like we've said before, please continue to drop your questions in the chat, and we will stop the presentation at times to make sure that we answer those. So to continue moving forward, to talk a little bit about ICE interactions and how to handle these interactions. There we go. We definitely want to stress the fact that all people in the U.S. have rights. Just because someone is undocumented or has DACA or just has a visa, that doesn't mean that, you know, immigration agents can act with impunity, that they can just barge into our communities and scoop people off the ground. Very much there are still procedures and laws that they need to follow and abide by. And if they don't, we need to make sure that we take notice of that we record it, and then we fight those types of detentions in court. And we very much like acknowledge and vocalize the fact that rights have been abused in the process of, you know, taking someone from their home or taking someone from their community. So to begin with, we're going to go through a few scenarios. The first one is what to do if ICE comes to your home. The very first thing that people need to remember is that they need to try and remain calm. These situations can be very frightening. They can be very traumatizing, undeniably. And in the moment, you know, natural instinct might be to run, to hide, something along those lines. You don't want to run, because when you decide to run, that gives ICE agents, they assume that you are guilty if you are running. So you definitely never want to give an ICE agent a motivation or a reason to chase after you or to use violence against you. So if an ICE agent comes to your home, they're going to knock on the door. You do not have to open the door. Unless they have a signed warrant from a judge, you do not need to open that door. You can keep that door closed and you can speak with them through the door. You know, they're going to be on the outside. They're going to say a lot of things. You very much have every right to say, I'm not opening the door until I see a signed warrant from a judge. You can slide that warrant under the door for me to inspect before I let you into my home. Another thing is you don't have to answer any of their questions. If they don't have that warrant, you have every right to remain silent. You know, regardless of your legal status, you can remain silent. If you do choose to speak with ICE agents, we definitely advise that you do not lie. Do not produce any falsified documentation. You know, don't be vague. If you do choose to speak with them, we advise you to tell the truth, because lying to a federal officer may negatively impact your case in the future. So you either choose to remain silent, or if you do choose to speak with them, we advise you not to lie. Additionally, they might hand you a document to sign. They might use language that says, oh, sign here, everything's going to be okay. Oh, don't worry about this. Like, all we need is you to we'll fix it, just sign here, everything, you know, you'll be okay, sign here. Be very careful about any document that an ICE agent that hands you. If you are in a situation where maybe a family member is being called upon by ICE, definitely advise them not to sign anything without previously having an immigration attorney look over it, because there have been plenty of notable cases where folks accidentally sign their own deportation orders. These documents are not supposed to be user-friendly. They're not going to be in big fonts. They're not going to use, you know, clear language. Their purpose is to try and confuse people, to make you even more scared. So definitely, if you are in this situation where you come in contact with ICE, remain silent if you want, be honest, do not sign any documents until an immigration attorney that you trust has looked them over. Because we don't want to get into the situation where you've accidentally basically told the United States, okay, it's time to deport me. And in addition to this, we also would advise you to have a red card on hand. These are what the Know Your Rights cards look like. On the screen, they're blue. We just wanted people to be able to see the language. If you do not have this red card on hand, we can share this. You know, just reach out to us. We dropped our emails in the chat, and we will mail you red cards. They're already laminated. We advise that you keep these red cards in your purses, in your cars, in your wallets with you at all times, so you can use them in case of any type of situation where you come into contact with an ICE agent. And before we continue, I think a couple of questions popped up. Yeah, so could you ask an ICE agent to leave your property? Are they allowed to be on private property without your permission? And that's something that we'll cover, but essentially, private property, they're not allowed to enter your home without a warrant. And that's why we say keep the door closed. They are not allowed to just, bust down the door or enter even like a business. If it's a private area of a business, they're not allowed to enter that space unless the owner of the business vocalizes and specifically says, yes, you may enter this space. If an ICE agent does force their way into your home, you need to make sure that you have at one point or another vocalized, I did not give you permission to enter my home. I do not consent to you entering my home. You are entering a private residence. You are entering a private area, and I have not consented. So that type of language is very important when they do knock and then force their way in. Do you want to go forward on the screen, Anna Sophia, or?
Yeah, so if ICE agents enter your home, if they do force their way in, don't resist. If you wish to exercise your rights, state, I do not consent to your entry or your search of these premises. I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and I wish to speak with a lawyer as soon as possible. Inform them if there are children, elderly, or ill people in the home. Pay attention to where the officers search and what they're wearing and what they say. And then when they leave, write down what happened. So you have a record of what happened. And then this is very important, but if the police have a warrant, an arrest warrant, they are legally allowed to enter the home of the person on the warrant if they believe that the person is inside. But a warrant of removal or deportation, which is called Form I-205, does not allow the officers to enter the home without consent. So Wendy will go a little bit more in depth into those differences, and we'll show you what those look like.
Yeah, and before we look at those warrants, similarly to the scenario of ICE coming to your home, if ICE comes to your work, utmost importance, remain calm. This is where the situation gets a little bit trickier because things like an office, a restaurant, like a park, a shopping center, those are public spaces. So anybody is allowed to be in them. However, the difference is so if a restaurant has a door with a sign that says like for staff only or employees only, behind that door, that's a private space because there's indication and signage that says that this is a private space. ICE agents are not allowed to enter that space unless the owner of the establishment has given them permission to do so. Very much like ICE agents can enter public spaces, they can walk into restaurants, they can walk into shopping malls, they can, even enter some schools, depending on the local policies. But if ICE does come to your work, like we said, it is important to remain calm. Do not run, like we've mentioned. Do not give ICE any reason to chase after you, to follow you, because they are presuming that people running have committed a crime. So also of importance, your employer has no obligation to divulge any information related to his employees. There is no, like law or policy says that an employer has to say like, oh yeah, this person's from this country and this person's from this country. Here are their documents. Your employer does not have to divulge your immigration status. If ICE does come to your work, it is advisable that your employer videotapes what is happening through phone, if they have a camcorder, if there are security cameras, it is important that all of that is being documented. If they are there for you, you have the right to remain silent, like we've mentioned already, and you can ask to speak with an attorney. If they try to detain you, this is the part where it is important to pay attention to these warrants, because there is a difference between an official warrant signed by a judge that has weight and that you have to comply with, and then a warrant that immigration themselves produced. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. These are the differences in the two warrants. On the left, this is the enforceable legal binding warrant. So this is an actual warrant signed by a district court, signed by a district judge. This one has power. If someone produces this type of warrant with your name, with a relative's name, with a friend's name, this one, they do have the right to detain you. However, on the other side is the non-binding ICE warrant. So up here, you can say that it says U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So ICE agents work under the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So this is essentially just a document saying we give ourselves permission to arrest you. This does not have power. This is the one where you can say this is not a legally binding warrant and keep the door closed. You can say, I need you to get off this private property. I need you to leave, and you can come back when you have an actual warrant signed by a judge. These warrants on the right side, the non-binding ICE warrants, they may look official. That is their point. They're trying to, I don't want to say they're trying to trick you, but they're trying to trick you. It's not super clear down here, but it says name and signature of the officer. Like I said, that's just the officer essentially saying, I just gave myself permission to detain you or to arrest you. You do not need to comply with these. If they force you to comply, make a note of that. And when you speak to an attorney, in detail, describe the ways that they forced you to comply with this non-binding ICE warrant. So to speak a little bit about the limitations of ICE, like we've said before, they can only enter private areas if they have that judicial warrant or if they have been granted explicit permission by the owners of the space. The judicial warrant, it needs to be signed by a judge. Down here, you can see what those signature lines look like. Always inspect the document, never just take an ICE agent for their word. Without that judicial warrant, ICE agents need your permission to enter your home or your business if it's a private area. Like we said, it is crucial, it is necessary that you vocalize these spaces. So this is a private area. You cannot enter. I am not consenting to you entering. Do you have a judicial warrant? If you do not, you need to leave. You have no power here. It is easier said than done, especially for our communities that may only speak Spanish. So that's why we rely heavily on each other. If you are in this situation and you see an ICE raid occurring and there may not be, a lot of English speakers, this is what the point of this presentation is for. Speak up for each other, advise each other on the ways that they should communicate with ICE. If you have like parents or family members or friends who, this information might be useful to, make sure they know this. Make sure that just because ICE comes knocking, that doesn't mean that ICE needs to be let in. Unless they have that judicial warrant. And like we said, they will try to use those administrative warrants. Those administrative warrants do not give them the permission that they say they do.
So in case of ICE detention, if you or someone else you know is detained by ICE, you have the right to a hearing to challenge a deportation order, unless you waive your right to a hearing or sign something called a stipulated removal order, or take what's called voluntary departure. You also have the right to an attorney, but the government does not have to provide one for you. So you should ask for a list of free or low cost alternatives. If you have no lawyer, you can ask the court to allow you time to find one. And you also have the right to a hearing to and so some of these organizations here in Oregon and Washington that can help with detention are Pueblo Unido, Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, also known as NIRP, and Metropolitan Public Defender. So those are, we have the contact information here on the slide, and these organizations help individuals who have been detained by ICE.
Yeah, and this is kind of going back to that phrase, affirmative legal action. This is the opposite of that. When you enter deportation proceedings, you've officially entered like defensive legal action. And deportation defense, it is very expensive. You know, to be completely transparent, even these organizations listed here, they do have a lot of like requirements around like certain poverty guidelines, certain, like if someone has a criminal background, they may not be able to provide services. So a lot of folks often have to turn to private defense, and that can be very expensive. That's why ICS, we prioritize affirmative legal action. So we prioritize the before the worst case scenario. That's why we want to make sure that people have either the protection of DACA, or that they, you know, are applying for their residency, or, you know, are looking into a family petition. That way they don't get caught up in this system, and they don't have to end up in this place where they are defending their right to stay in the country, because that is very complicated, very costly, it is timely, it takes a lot of energy, and it can cause a lot of trauma for a family. To be separated from your family and placed in a detention center, to have to do multiple check-ins with ICE throughout the year, that does have a lot of weight. And we definitely do not want our clients, our communities to be in these positions. And before we keep going with the last section of the presentation, I'm going to check the chat once more. Do ICE agents also wear body cams like police officers? I don't think all of them do. I think some may, but I've never heard of, you know, that being like a straight across line for all of them. And I'm not super sure on this, but I also don't think even if they wore body cams, they have like the same policies in place that holds them accountable to release that footage. Yeah, because I don't think I heard of a lot of incidents of, you know, like, oh, ICE footage shows that, yeah. And then is there a time limit given to folks as they are looking for or getting in contact with a lawyer? This is a little more complicated because it really just depends on the situation and why ICE detained you. So if a detention is based on like some extreme crime, then the process might be a little faster to try and deport you. But if it was based on, say, like a random traffic stop for whatever reason, those circumstances might change. Definitely, we advise folks not to wait. Don't just hang out in detention. Definitely try to get in contact with your family members. Often the amount of calls you're allowed to make from the detention center can be very limited. They can also be very costly. So that is why we want to provide these resources. So either you can share them with your family members, or your family members can share them amongst themselves. One of the family preparedness plans guidelines is to always have on hand the number of an immigration attorney that specializes in defense. So for families that have undocumented family members, it is very important for them to always just be vigilant and be ready, to be ready for those circumstances. I don't think there are going to be a lot of people that are just hanging out in detention waiting for something to happen. Most people act as soon as they can. They either find the representation themselves from detention, or their family members find the legal representation for them outside of detention.
And also, it's just important to reiterate that an attorney will not be provided. Like in United States criminal court, everyone does have the right to an attorney, but immigration court, unfortunately, that is not the case. So it is up to the client or the individual detained or their family members to find representation.
Yeah, and now to keep going forward, something that we always end our presentations with is just this general advisory for people to be on the lookout for notario fraud, or what is considered immigration fraud. So often bad faith actors using false promises or just completely false advertising, they'll say that they're qualified to help immigrants obtain a lawful status. They say that they're licensed. They say that, you know, they have the experience to help you fill out your DACA application. They'll charge you thousands thousands of dollars for that help, and that help will never arrive. So especially right now, as immigration reform enters the national discourse, we're going to start seeing more and more of these bad faith actors. So whenever you choose representation for your immigration case, you always want to make sure that you choose a licensed attorney or a licensed accredited representative. So someone that has studied, that has the experience. Some red flags to notarios. If someone promises an express pathway to DACA, if someone promises or says, give me $2,000 and I'll get you a spot in line for Biden's new law. If someone says like, oh, tell your mom if she gives me $5,000, I can get her a green card in a year. No process necessary. That's all. The bottom line is, if it is too good, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. The reality of the situation is that the immigration process, it's long, it takes time, it's at times very frustrating. There really is no way to skip forward. There is no magic form to fill out that gets you to the front of the line. So we definitely want to be on the lookout for this, because these folks, these bad faith actors can ruin the lives of our community members. If a notario decides to, apply in your name and they apply for the wrong benefit, or they incorrectly fill out the form and submit it to immigration, the immigration process doesn't have a do-over. That first application is your first and only shot, and that can trigger a lot of really negative consequences and may even trigger your own deportation order. So always look for accreditation, always look for a license. If you have come in contact with a notario or have been a victim of immigration fraud or almost a victim of immigration fraud, please report that person to the Oregon State Bar, or reach out to us and we'll help you with that reporting process. Because these people, they act in bad faith. They take thousands of dollars from our community that our community doesn't always have. So we want to make sure that we stop them before they create real damage and hurt for our families and our friends.
And following off of what Wendy said, if it's hard to navigate what is a trustworthy legal source if there's these notarios out there. So we've created an easy, accessible list here for you guys of trustworthy legal assistance here in Oregon. These are the main 5 nonprofit organizations that help with immigration. So you could also seek help of a private attorney, but that's going to be a lot more expensive. So these 5 nonprofits offer low cost services, high quality, low cost services to immigrants in Oregon. The top one is ICS, that's our organization, Immigration Counseling Service, and you can see the contact information there, 503-221-1689. And Wendy and I have also dropped our contact information in the chat. You could email us or call as well if you have more follow-up questions after the presentation, or if you're looking for legal services. And the second organization is called SOAR. The third is Catholic Charities, the fourth is Lutheran Community Services, and the fifth is called ERCO. So these are trustworthy legal services, and you can be confident that if you go through any of these organizations that they will be able to help you out. And then there's also other resources that are there to help. In addition to legal resources, these organizations have some social programs as well. There's the Oregon Public Benefits Hotline. There's also Causa Oregon, Oregon Law Center, and El Programa. So they also provide resources for folks in the community as well.
Yeah, and if you're ever worried that you're reaching a not licensed attorney, or if you need help with a case that isn't immigration related, you can call the Oregon Bar Lawyer Referral Service. That number is also on the screen, 503-684-3763. You can say like, oh, I got into a car accident, I need help, with my insurance claim. Can you help me connect with a lawyer? And they'll give you either a private lawyer, or they'll give you resources to more affordable lawyers in the state of Oregon that are licensed through them, the Oregon Bar. And of course, if after you've heard all of this from our presentation, the different avenues, the different pathways to citizenship, if you believe you may qualify, your parents may qualify, you may have siblings, friends, neighbors, please reach out to us. Our number is on the screen, 503-789-5984. Our offices are closed at the moment, but we are offering all of our services remotely. So all consultations are done over the phone, over Zoom, over WhatsApp, because the urgency for immigration legal services is always there. As long as there are borders, there are going to be immigration attorneys to try and help you navigate those. So definitely reach out to us. We are here to help. Our services are affordable. If you can't pay for the legal services, if you can't pay for your filing fees, we will do what we can to make sure that you continue your process. We have a lot of community partners that often give us grants. They offer scholarships to community members. So the last thing we want is for someone to be stuck in limbo just because they can't afford the process. And of course, if you have the means, please donate to the Immigrant Legal Relief Fund. We are going to relaunch this campaign in May. The Immigrant Legal Relief Fund is essentially a pool of money that we offer to clients that don't have the $495 for a DACA application, that don't have the $600 to $700 for a citizenship application. So through donations from the community, we are able to ease those worries and get people along their way so they can successfully be approved for the benefits that they qualify and that they deserve. And of course, an upcoming event we have our immigration town hall. 3 of our licensed attorneys who have years of experience in the field will be talking about the future of DACA under the Biden administration. We'll be talking about immigration reform and the new bill proposed by Biden. And we'll also be talking about the unaccompanied minors program and the so-called crisis at the border that is occurring. It's not so much as a crisis as it is a lack of empathy, unfortunately, from some agencies under our government. So very much please join us. It's going to be on May 6th at 6 p.m. on Zoom. And hopefully by then we'll figure out our Facebook Live connection because we are hoping to go on live through Facebook. So please join us. It's going to be a great time, lots of information, lots of important information that we believe our community should have. And now we're going to open up the space for questions. We'll check the chat. This is the moment to drop any last minute questions before we say our goodbyes. And one question is, does that process work the same if a state local police officer approaches you? And that would be in regards to our stuff about ICE. The process would be very different. So ICE agents are federal agents. They do not have as much power or, I guess, autonomy or just general authority as police officers. So the process would be very different with police officers, especially right now with the different national conversations that are occurring. If you are driving and a police officer pulls you over, definitely comply with their directions. State police and local police have a lot more authority than ICE agents. That's why you often hear about sanctuary laws. Sanctuary laws enacted by states are often built around this notion that local police don't have to cooperate or help out ICE agents because it is accepted that local police have more power and more authority in these communities than ICE agents. So very much we would advise you, when it comes to actual police from your communities, definitely comply with their orders. They have a lot more leeway and they have a lot more authority to conduct themselves in certain manners within our spaces.
And then I see there's another question here about the I-130 petitions that we talked about in the beginning. So those are family petitions. If you have certain kinds of relationships, you will be placed in a specific category. And these are for to obtain a visa. And then once you have a visa, you'll be able to get your green card. So again, there can be long wait times depending on what category you're in, but it is a path to obtain a green card. And then after the green card, you can apply for citizenship as well.
Yeah, so the I-130s themselves don't have like specific benefits, like say
Mhm.
residency or DACA. So the I-130 is basically like the stepping stone that's part of the process. So like the family petition process, it has multiple steps, multiple parts of an application. And like we mentioned, that process can get a little more complicated depending on the history of the beneficiaries. So that the family petitions get a lot more complicated when, the family member came into the country without a proper inspection or any documentation at the border. So very much like the I-130s are the first step to getting to the visa and then to the green card. And we have a few more minutes. We're going to hang around for a couple of more minutes, but then we will say our goodbyes. So this presentation, we're going to post it on our YouTube, and then it's going to go on our Facebook page. So feel free to share it with your friends, with your family, with your communities. If you have, relatives or community members that speak Spanish, we also have KYRs in Spanish on our Facebook page, fully available for anyone to watch. So if there are no more questions, we are about to hit time. Do you have anything else to add, Ana Sofia?
No, I think we've covered it.
Yeah, lots of information, but we believe it's very important information. I've heard of people having to leave the country to get residency. Is that true? Do you want to take this one, Ana Sofia?
Yeah, so yeah, it looks like we have a last question here. It really depends on the case. And again, we advise everyone to consult with an immigration attorney to know what are the specific factors of the case. But there is a process known as consular processing, where when your visa is available, you do have to leave the United States and have an interview. And then if that is approved, you'll come back in. But that's based on very specific circumstances, and it's not across the board. So depending on what your situation is.
Yeah, and all of those, with a family petition, with any of these pathways, all of those later on obstacles down the road, if you have an attorney with experience, with a license who knows what they're doing, they will be able to foresee that. When you sit down to talk about your legal contract with them, to talk about the scope of their representation, they'll make sure to say, like, this is the pathway. We're eventually going to, go through consular processing, like at Ciudad Juarez. This is what that's going to look like. So if you choose trustworthy representation, you're never going to find yourself just in the void saying like, oh, now my family needs to go to Mexico to go through Ciudad Juarez. No, because most attorneys are ready to deal with that circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll definitely lay out the entire path for you and what to expect at every stage of the process.
Mm-hmm. And they'll be there to answer questions, or, if you have concerns about traveling, they'll try their best to also mitigate some of those fears and some of that uncertainty. But yeah, we're out of time now. We want to thank all of you for sharing the space with us, especially for our folks from Here to Stay. We know you just finished classes and then you joined a very intense discussion about immigrant rights in the country. So we want to say thank you. Please continue to be advocates to your communities. This information was in English, but there are lots of Spanish speakers that need access to this. Please reach out to us if you have any more questions. If you believe that this information would be helpful at other presentations, we are happy to present for other groups as well. And thank you to Ana Sofia for joining me today. I appreciate all of your knowledge and your experience.
Thanks for hosting, Wendy, and thank you all for joining. Hopefully we were able to answer your questions, and feel free to reach out if you have further questions or if you want to consult with one of our attorneys.
Yes, of course. Thank you all so much. We hope you have a great evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye.